You're tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. This podcast will contain strong language and spoilers for decades-old media properties.
Join us.
Welcome, everybody. This is the podcast where we examine pop culture franchises of the VHS era, usually improv news stories, and sometimes rant and rave about the same toxic fanboy topics that everybody on YouTube and TikTok has already bitched about, but we're still going to do it anyway because it's our podcast, goddammit, and you're going to listen to it so we can recharge our motivation for the next episode when we'll get back to imagining how we might improve our favorite movies, TV, and games. I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we were raised by rentals. Mike! A wise man once said, "You can't judge a book by its cover, but you can't stop people from trying."
That's very fucking accurate. I gotta say, that opening definitely got me. They usually do, but this one in particular, I was trying not to laugh.
I'm surprised I got through it in one try. That was good.
Right? No edits. Yes.
Yes. One take. I love it. Oh, God. But yeah, we're bitching already in the intro before we even get to the rant. So yeah, for those who are listening, if you haven't seen the title of the episode, we are going to be doing another one of our patented rental rants. This time out. I almost said this week, and I'm like, I have no idea when this is going to come out. One of our patented rental rant episodes, and this time we are going to return to our series that might not ever end, are about toxic fandom, bullshit fanboys, and the bullshit they perpetuate. And we got a couple of topics we're going to touch on today, but we're going to start right off the bat by returning to a topic we briefly mentioned in our last rental rant, and that is the preemptive strike. Right? What I mean is the people who start hating on something and panning something before it even comes out.
These are the people who do the fucking review bombs when a TV show comes out, like when it's episode 1 and we've barely had a chance to scratch the surface and they're already review bombing the hell out of it on Rotten Tomatoes. Those types of people just hating on something before it even exists. Blows my fucking mind.
Absolutely. And you definitely see this mostly with movies, like you mentioned Rotten Tomatoes. And there's so many examples. One we mentioned on the last episode where we brought this up was that Sonic the Hedgehog movie where, people were bitching about the design of the character and probably a lot of other stuff too, before the movie came out. And you had mentioned in that example that, okay, well, maybe the notes were good and that maybe the design wasn't that great. And in that example, maybe that was the exception to the rule. But I mean, for the most part, it's foolish to just start panning something and hating on something before you even get a chance to see it. Because you don't know how good the trailer is. You don't know how good the marketing department is behind that movie. For all you know, you're seeing a shitty TV commercial for a good-ass movie.
Mm-hmm. And how many times have we seen just in our lifetimes, like back in the day when a movie would come out, we'd see the theatrical trailer and it's like, oh, wow, that looks really cool. And then you'd see the 30-second TV spot where they hack that theatrical trailer into pieces. And you're like, wow, that kind of looks like shit. So it does depend on how it's portrayed, like in the trailers. So you never really can tell just from a quick snippet how something is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes trailers can just completely ruin a movie. And this is probably yet another rental rant we can go on, which is the art and the opposite thereof of making a good trailer, because it's gotten to the point where I don't even like watching trailers at all anymore. I used to get to the movie theater early. If I was going to go see a movie in the theater, I would get there early or made sure I wasn't late because I didn't want to miss the trailers. And now I am fine with missing the trailers. Half the time I want to miss them. Like maybe that's a good time to go hit the bathroom before the movie starts because they just give so much away in trailers these days. It's like you get to watch the mini movie version for 3 minutes and then what's the fucking point of buying the ticket to see the damn thing?
Right. And then very few movies can successfully show you a trailer that entices you while keeping the actual details of the plot hidden. I think the last time I saw that was it 2020 with Barbarian, or maybe it was 2021. I forgot when that movie came out. But the trailers for Barbarian, they were very deceptive. Like they showed us enough. Like you knew it was a horror movie. You knew half of the actors that were in the movie. You knew it involved some kind of Airbnb, but that was about it. And then once I watched the movie, I'm not going to ruin anything for anyone who hasn't seen it, but there is a sharp turn about maybe a half hour into that flick where it went in a way I did not expect it to, and it introduced actors that I wasn't even aware were in the movie. Had I done a little more digging, I probably would have found out they were in the movie. But it was very interesting that my only knowledge of that flick was seeing the theatrical trailer at the movies. Like when I went to, and I was like, oh, that looks cool. I like Bill Skarsgård. I'm going to watch that. And then watching the movie and being like, holy shit, this is not at all what I was expecting. And it's amazing.
Yeah, and that's what I want when I see a movie or read a book or anything. I want to be taken on a ride. I want the twists and turns to be surprising and thrilling. Like, I hate it when they give away the big twist in the trailer. And even if it's not necessarily like the big twist ending, but even if it's like, the cool hook that makes the movie interesting, like Cabin in the Woods, right? Like, again, I don't want to spoil anything for a movie that's been out for years, but still, like, just like Barbarian, like Cabin in the Woods takes a weird turn pretty early, and if you didn't know where it was going, like you like me would be caught off guard. But like if they had just given that away in the trailer, I don't know that I would have skipped the movie. I don't know if I would have not bothered to watch it, but it would have completely changed my approach to the film and my experience in watching it. But because I didn't know what that first act little hook was, when it happened, I was like, oh, fuck yeah, that's cool. Like, this movie is totally going to go somewhere that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting just like a typical like Cabin in the Woods horror movie. Now it's going to go in somewhere else. And now I'm excited. I'm more excited than when I sat down to watch it. And like, that's the best kind of experience.
Oh, absolutely. And that to get us back to our topic, like that is exactly why these types of preemptive strikes are fucking stupid, because you sometimes will kill a property before it even has a chance to shine, and it could have been an amazing property. Like there are so many times where movies they'll do so bad at the theater because people were already shitting on it. Even if it was a good flick, people are already shitting on it before it came out. So a lot of the money gets pulled for a possibility of a sequel because it doesn't find its audience until way later on streaming. And by then the money is already gone, and you have to wait another 10, 20 years before they reboot, and now in cases it's 5 years, but still, whatever.
I know. I couldn't believe I saw that new Hellboy trailer, and I'm like, it hasn't even been that long. Come on.
Right. And honestly, I liked the last reboot. Don't get me wrong. I'm still pissed that we will never get the third part of the Guillermo del Toro trilogy because I fucking loved Ron Perlman as Hellboy, and I loved those first two movies. But the one with David Harbour, I thought was a really fun movie. Like, I was like, all right, I'm in, let's go. And it's like, all right, reboot again. Like, fuck. But I am excited about the Crooked Man because I love that story. So
yeah. I'm not shitting on it. I'm just like, so soon, but I had the same thought with The Batman and with Spider-Man Homecoming, where it's like, hasn't it been that long since the last time? Fantastic Four, like how many times are they going to try that movie?
Right, exactly.
But yeah, so there's examples of movies that came out that, maybe they didn't turn out to be the greatest movies ever, but movies that just completely like lit up the social media sphere before they even came out. Something like the 2016 Ghostbusters movie with the all-female cast. Like, you didn't even have to see that movie to know that it was bad if you believed the internet, because they just jumped all over it. And it was every imaginable argument from, that it's not the real Ghostbusters, that, it's a bunch of girls, to, like, these aren't like funny characters or funny actresses or like whatever. It's like every argument imaginable to just completely shit on the movie and before it ever came out. But what happens is they end up killing the box office, like you said, either because the studio pulls the money for a sequel, and a lot of times they pull the money from the PR. They pull the money from the marketing campaign. And so a movie gets announced that it's going to come out, like some big movie, and right off the bat, the initial like polling or whatever you call it is all 100% stark raving negative. And then they pull the money for the marketing. So you don't get more ads. You don't get a second cut of the trailer. You don't get posters. You don't get like an opening weekend push. And the movie just like comes out and fucking farts its way through its opening weekend and goes away. And then all the haters are like, see, I told you that it was going to suck.
Yep. And and the same thing happened with the RoboCop remake, where it was just shat on like before it even hit theaters. And I remember, hell, I was kind of guilty of this too, because I hated the look of the suit. I was like,
Mhm.
why is it all black? I don't like that. Like, and granted, once watching the movie, it's like, oh yeah, there was the silver suit too, and then they did the whole like, make it more sleek time. It's like, okay, I get it. They actively talk about it in the movie, so I'm cool with it. My only complaint still is that they kept his hand, and the only reason I complain about that is the fact that it was so poignant in the original where they said we saved his arm, and he's like, I thought we agreed full body prosthetic or prosthesis, and she's like, yeah, but we were able to save it. He's like, he's dead, he's property, lose the arm. Like that I thought was so poignant because it shows what bastards OCP were, and that Murphy was no longer human, he was property. So the fact that they made him
Mhm.
keep his arm or his hand in this one, I'm like, I just felt like it made OCP a little less villainous, and that made me sad, but that's just a personal preference.
Yeah, I think remakes in general fit into this category a lot, and we don't need to go back and bitch about remakes because we've covered this topic like numerous times. But just in general, before we started recording, I didn't really do a lot of research, but I was just Googling like, like top 10, 20 movies that were panned before they came out. And, just the kind of usual suspects are out there. I already mentioned like The Amazing Spider-Man and stuff like The Last Airbender. But then just remakes in general tend to end up on those lists. I think in the early 2000s and maybe into the 2010s, people were a lot more open to remakes. It's probably why there were so many of them. But these days, like when they announced that they were remaking Roadhouse, for example, it's like, holy
Right.
shit. Like, at least in the corner of the internet that I live in, like people just came out of the woodwork with vitriol to spit all over this thing. And like it turned out to be a pretty good movie, and I think the overall opinion of the movie has really shifted toward here's an example of how you do a remake right, and look at this great cast and this great story. But
Yeah.
it's a complete 180 from what people were saying before the movie came out.
Oh, absolutely. I still haven't had a chance to watch it. I've watched a few clips. It looks solid, and I've heard nothing but good things from people I trust. Because that's the other thing, and we got to talk about this, is people who make their opinion based solely on early reviews. But like, I always like if I'm going to listen to a reviewer, it's going to be one of two things: people that I know who have similar movie taste to me. So if Maurice tells me that a movie is good, chances are I'll check it out because usually we're on the same page. Not always, but usually. So even if it's like a movie I had no intention of watching, and he's like, "Dude, I thought it was really good. You should watch it." I'm like, "All right, I'll give it a shot." Um, but the only other type I'll watch is like there's a handful of movie critics like Joe Bob Briggs who I listen to where I'm like, I usually agree with your reviews, so okay. But for the most part, yeah, I want to see it for my fucking self. So Roadhouse is kind of in that camp where I love the original. When I heard they were remaking it, I'm like, I like Jake Gyllenhaal. I'll give it a shot. I just never got around to it. However, I did watch a clip of Colin McGregor walking around doing his like villain walk, and I couldn't stop laughing. Because like
Yeah, he's so silly.
it's this wide armed swagger, and he's got this like shit eating grin, and in my head, all I can hear is like the Skeletor laugh, like like he's just got that. It was very funny. So
Yeah, he's an example of somebody who just like plays himself in a movie.
yeah,
It's not really acting. He's just kind of doing his thing.
right.
But you mentioned something about forming your opinion on something before it came out, not because you saw a trailer and just immediately started, hating on it or thinking it was shit because of what you saw, but because of what someone else said. When someone else's opinion of the movie can completely color the way that you think about it before the movie even comes out. If it's somebody that you trust, you might think, well, I don't know, like this RoboCop remake looks kind of stupid, or this Sonic movie looks kind of stupid, or this, the Michael Bay TMNT looks kind of stupid, but like, okay, fine. Like if my friend likes it, like I'll give it a chance.
Right.
But like the opposite end of that is it's the continuation of our main topic here is people who hate a movie before it even comes out, but then there's the people who hate the movie because other people told them that it was going to suck or that it does suck, and then they just never bother to try, or worse yet, they think that the movie sucks but they never actually saw it. They were just listening to what other people were saying and just like jumped onto the bandwagon of, well, if everybody says that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull sucks, well then it must suck, right? It's the worst movie ever, right? It like ruined the whole Indiana Jones franchise, right? Because everyone says that, but like, did you watch it? Did you actually like see the movie and make up your own mind? I'm not saying you need to watch it or that it's a good or bad. I'm just saying like, but did you give it a chance, or did you just, go along with what everyone else was saying?
And see, and that's the thing. Like you have two different types of people that do that. You have the types of people who will perpetuate that something is terrible. So it's like, I haven't seen it, but I heard by everybody it's terrible, so it is terrible, right? So I'm just going to tell everyone it's terrible. And then you have the people who just will avoid it at all costs because they heard it's terrible and never try it for themselves. So it's like, either way, that is very destructive, not only to media in general, but to your own damn entertainment. Like, enjoy things for yourself, or try to at least. And I mean, and don't get me wrong, there's been plenty of things I've seen that I have absolutely no desire to see, like where I've seen a trailer from, like, it doesn't look good to me, so I'll just ignore it based on that. And then years later we'll hear, oh, it was pretty good, and give it a try and be like, shit, I missed out. So I mean, I'm not saying I'm innocent of never judging a book by its cover, but more often than not, when you do that, you end up losing out on cool shit.
Yeah, I think it's okay to judge a book by its cover. I mean, I think that's why the cover is on the book, and why they, publishers try to come up with like cool artwork, and why movie studios make trailers. They want you to judge the book by its cover and decide if you're going to try it or not. But the problem is that when you make up your mind, not because you saw the trailer and decided for yourself if it looked like it was worth your money or not, but when somebody else saw the trailer and then told you like, oh, this is going to suck. And then you're like, yeah, this is going to suck. And now your opinion has been colored by this other person's stance. And it's not your stance. That's not your opinion. And it doesn't matter if you ever were going to watch it or not. But it's like you've just adopted somebody else's opinion as your own without making up your own mind, and that drives me crazy.
Yeah. And you see that a lot in the video game world, where like people won't even play games. They'll just read a review of it and be like, oh, it sucks, it's trash, the game's over. And it's like, have you played it though? Because like, I mean, I know when Mortal Kombat 1, the most recent Mortal Kombat game, came out, personally, I loved it. I thought the storyline was fantastic. It was exactly what I was kind of hoping, because they pulled a little bait and switch on us in the game before, where basically they were remaking the whole timeline, and they made it look like the timeline shifted in MK11 to become the new era, which is Mortal Kombat 1, but it actually was still continuing the old remake of the old timeline. It was a very cool way that they did it, but I thought the storyline was fucking amazing. Really cool, but a lot of people weren't even giving it a chance because of the bait and switch, because they're like, well, they didn't do what they said they were going to do, so screw it. And it's like, no, just play it, trust me, just play it. The story is really good. Like it does what you think it's going to. It's awesome, but they don't want to give it a shot.
Yeah, or like, if you don't want to give it a shot, fine, but then don't perpetuate this opinion that it sucks. Like, keep your mouth shut. Or like, your opinion should be like, I don't know, I didn't play it, I didn't think it looked that good. And like, that's it, full stop. Like, you don't need to say anything else. And this came up even today. I was at, GameStop with my kids, and Griffin was looking through some games, and he pulled something out. I don't even remember what game it was. He pulled something out from the used rack and was like, oh, this looks pretty cool. Oh man, it's on the Wii U. That sucks. And I'm like, oh yeah, that does suck that it's on the Wii U. Do they have a Switch version? He was like, no, the Wii U, that's like that crappy console. The Wii U sucks. I can't believe they made this game for the Wii U. Like, the Wii U sucks. And I'm like, we never owned a Wii U. How do you know that it sucks?
Right.
Like, we never bothered to buy that version. We never upgraded because, my kids at the time were, they were of the age where they were still really using the Wii a lot, and they were like younger, and the games, were better for them. And we just never bothered to do the upgrade until the Switch came out. And then, but it was sort of like bothering me, like it stuck in my craw of like, where did you hear that? Like, I've never complained about the Wii U. And obviously it's just like people on YouTube or people on social media who are like, oh, the Wii U, what a huge failure that was, But it's like, I don't know, like the difference would have been like, oh, that's on the Wii U, we never had that one. And then that's it. Like, you don't need to add the additional comment of like, the Wii U sucks, because like, how do you know? You have no firsthand knowledge.
I have this conversation with Caleb all the time, where he'll be talking about something and I'll be like, well, wait, how do you know? And he's like, well, everybody knows, it sucks. And it's like, have you played it? Like, cause it happens with games all the time. And it's like, have you played? Well, no, but everyone knows. It's like, well, if you haven't played it, don't say that it sucks. Like, you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And this came up in one of our other episodes too. I forget which one it was. And I admitted that I had fallen victim to that mindset when it came to comic books, because as a kid who grew up in the 90s and collected comics from the 90s, and I got into comics in, the early 90s, where Image Comics was just exploding, and then there was a lot of turmoil at Marvel and DC, and it was the era of the death of Superman and Nightfall, where Batman gets his back broken, and Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, dies, and all this big changes to these like classic characters. And so for years I was under the impression that, oh man, DC Comics just sucked in the mid 90s. The death of Superman, Nightfall, oh, that's just garbage, right? Everyone hates that shit. Like, everybody makes fun of it. The Heroes Reborn at Marvel, when Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld came back and they did this whole alternate reality story. Oh, it's like the worst comics ever. But I never actually read those comics. I just had this opinion because that's what everybody always said. And it wasn't until recently that I actually read some of them for myself to realize that while yes, some of them do suck, Heroes Reborn, in my opinion, I did not change my opinion, but
Right.
some of the other storylines that I read, I'm like what the hell was I missing all these years? And it was because there were younger comic book fans who, to them, those comics were their formative titles, like the Azrael version of Batman with the weird suit that I couldn't stand, who filled in for Bruce Wayne when his back was broken. To them, that was their Batman. And to me,
Right.
that was like a foreign concept. But growing up and then hearing how much they love and miss, they have nostalgia for the era when that was Batman. And I can't understand it, because to me, it was the corniest bullshit. I couldn't even read it the first time because I didn't want to go anywhere close to it. And so I was
Hmm.
like, okay, fine, like, I'll give it a chance. And I'm like, okay, I get it now. It's still not for me, but I get it now, and I'm glad that I, manned up and actually went and read the damn things.
You know what? With the first thing for me, the first experience I had like that, where I couldn't kind of wrap my brain around that it wasn't for me, was the Star Wars prequels.
Okay.
Like, the Star Wars prequels, like, I don't get me wrong, I still enjoy them. I still like them. But it was like I was so hyped and so ready, but I was no longer a kid. And if you look at Star Wars, they've always been aimed at children. Like, since day one, episode 4, 5, and
Hmm.
6 definitely aimed at kids. There's a reason that Lucas was so hell bent on the toy rights. Um, so when I'm 19 years old watching The Phantom Menace, and it's got a little bit of that cheese factor that, Return of the Jedi had, I'm over there like, well, this isn't my Star Wars, and kind of grumpy about it, And I mean, I still liked all three of them, but it wasn't until I saw it through my nephew's eyes. That's the Star Wars
Hmm.
they grew up with. And they fucking love that saga. They love the whole Clone Wars, Anakin's rise and fall. Like, to
Hmm.
them, that is Star Wars. That is that. Like, they like the old movies, but they're like, nah, man. Like, the prequels, that's where it was at. Like, and it's because I was already aged out of it. And that's okay. That's okay that, like, a property that I love had something that wasn't technically for me, but to go around and try to trash it because of that is kind of silly. Like, there's
Yeah.
still people that love it.
Yeah, especially, different generations, and like, movies and TV shows, whatever, they can be for different people. They can be for different
Yeah.
audiences. Like, not every movie that comes out is for you. Like, I'm
Right.
sorry, like, the main character syndrome, I think, gets people in trouble because not everything is for you. Shit comes out
Absolutely.
and it's for kids, or it's for an older audience. There's some movies that are coming out, and especially like books and things that, especially comic books, that are very much for the older, aging out audience. That
Hmm.
people, they have money, and they're still buying the things that they've liked to buy in the same way they've wanted to buy them for decades, and it's like a constant money stream for the publishers and the movie studios, and that's all well and good, but like, it's not necessarily for you.
Dude, that's the whole action figure industry right now. It's like they realized, you know what? It's all middle-aged men from the 80s and 90s buying toys. Let's market toward them now.
Right.
That's It really is, because most of the children's toys are more like, blind box stuff, like electronic based, like stuff that ties in with like tablets or video games, and that's all great. Or like a lot of video game based action figures, like Fortnite figures and Minecraft figures. It's like the stuff that's based on like Transformers and Masters of the that's aimed at us. That's aimed at our generation. Not the kids can't like it, of course they can, but that's not the primary demographic that's buying it anymore.
Yeah.
Um, So it's like it pisses me off when I hear like people my age be like, "Who's all these fucking Minecraft action figures?" It's like, yeah, they're meant for kids. They're meant for them. It's not meant for you. Yours are over in the collectible section. Go buy your NECA. Be happy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's funny. I was at a Walmart the other day and I overheard someone say something like that, and it's exactly the same topic where they picked up what turned out to be a Paw Patrol game for PlayStation and literally said like, "Who the hell buys this shit? Like, who is this for? Who's playing Paw Patrol on PlayStation?" And in my head, I'm like, "Fucking kids, you idiot! Like, it's not for you. You're in your 30s or whatever the hell. Like, put it down, you big fucking baby. Like, it's not for you." Like,
And that's see now, and here's where I'm gonna have to play devil's advocate and switch for a second. The only time that stuff bothers me is when, like, okay, some of the I know we keep threatening to do a Star Wars episode. One of these days we will. But some of the Star Wars stuff that irritated me was like, okay, they're changing direction in certain things. It's not really for me. Like I said with the prequels, it's not really for me. Okay, so I back away. And then suddenly when it doesn't do as good, they start panning the fans that they told it wasn't for. Like, this is for a new set of people. This isn't for you. But then when it fails, they go, well, how come you didn't support it? It's like, well, you told me it wasn't for me and didn't want me around. So wait, how is it my fault still? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That's the only time I get mad, because I've seen that with like a few different like reboots and revamps of games or movies, and it's like, we're aiming it at a new audience, we're trying to like get new fans, and it's like, all right, cool, you do you. Like, I'm over here still enjoying my old school shit. And then when it comes out, they're like, well, the old fans didn't support it, so that's why it failed. And it's like, but you said that it wasn't made for us, so what did I miss?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only time that irks me.
The same is true in comics, that, you know, Marvel and DC and the big companies, they've been pandering to the same audience that's been aging out for decades. They only sell fucking $4 and $5 single issue comics to like middle-aged dudes who can afford it. It's really, really hard for like kids or, you know, younger readers in general to like get into comics, especially if you don't have a lot of money. It's so difficult. And even with the huge YA graphic novel market that's out there, which, you know, granted is like a gateway drug, but I mean, I'm falling into the stereotype myself that I generally hate, which is like, you know, referring to comics in general. But what I really mean is like the sort of traditional Marvel, DC superhero, like floppy pamphlets that, you know, that people think of when they think of comic books, like all those like big, you know, MCU and DCU movies are based on. And there's this constant complaints that, well, we can't get new readers. Like, we have all these big movies and people love the movies, but like nobody's reading the comics. And it's because they're just pandering to the same old fans they've been pandering to forever. And every time that there's any kind of effort put into, well, let's do like a younger version or a kid version, or let's do like a reboot, you know, like they did with Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate X-Men and stuff back in the 2000s. Like, let's put some money toward, you know, relaunching these books in a way that are like friendly to kids, but then they always fail. And I've made this argument before. It has nothing to do with criticism and everything to do with the fact that like you can't sell a $4 comic book to a kid on an allowance, even in the 2020s.
Exactly.
Like, they're so fucking expensive. And so they're not really trying hard to bring in a new audience. It's just pandering. It's just lip service of like, well, see, the kids didn't want to read it, so we're going to go back to, you know, having like Batman kill people and Spider-Man's going to get a sexually transmitted disease, like, which both of which actually happened, you know?
Yep.
It's just like all this, like, you know, silly stuff that I can't stand. And even the fact that, you know, to your point, like with the action figures, like pandering to these older audiences of people from the 80s and 90s who want this old stuff. And maybe pandering is like a mean word, but like that's who they're focusing on, because that's what they know. That's who they know their audience is, the people who have money and nostalgia, which is why Robert Kirkman right now has relaunched the G.I. Joe and Transformers comics, the so-called Energon universe. But he's not doing like the Michael Bay version of the Transformers that younger people might be familiar with, who might have nostalgia for those versions of the movies. He's doing the old 80s versions of all of the characters, you know, updated, granted, yes, but it's still the old original 80s versions of the characters. So the people who buy those comics are people who remember from the 80s. Like, you have to be of a certain age to even have any connection to these. And they're a big business and a lot of people are buying them. And I would put money on the fact that not a huge percentage of those people buying the new Transformers and G.I. Joe comics are there because they liked The Walking Dead and they realized
Right.
it was, oh, that's a Robert Kirkman comic, so I'll read that one too. Like, they're not coming in from The Walking Dead. They're coming in from the fact that they had Optimus Prime when they were 5.
Yep. And again, that's okay to have. Like, that is perfectly fine for that to exist. It doesn't always have to be aimed at a younger demographic for every single thing. It's okay for us old folks to get some comics and movies and toys and games and whatnot, and still have stuff that's not aimed at us. Like, we don't have to have the lion's share. Like, there's plenty of media for everyone.
Yeah, we kind of got off topic, and I started ranting about like they keep making all this old bullshit, like make comics for kids, and it's like, yeah, but I like all the old bullshit too. Like, I mean, I didn't, I don't get into the Transformers and G.I. Joe comics, but yeah,
Right.
I still like all the old characters that I've liked from back in the day. I bought the Wildcats reboot that was like from a 30-year-old comic, and I bought the new Night Thrasher comic because he was in the New Warriors again 30 years ago, but like. And in fact, and I'm going to say something here, and I hope people don't hate me, but I'm going to say it because it's kind of like driving home the point of the experience that I had. So I went to the comic book shop in person to buy a physical copy of a single issue pamphlet comic for Night Thrasher, a character who was supposed to be a hero of the 90s from 30 years ago, when he was cool, although some people argue that he was never cool because he was a dude on a skateboard. But I digress. So I buy this comic, and I am a white middle-aged male, probably obviously straight, with your traditional like middle-aged white guy fanboy beard, and I'm buying this comic from a person who, in my estimation, was in their early 20s, pretty sure they were transgender, very wild, to my opinion, fashion sense, just a very like eclectic and eccentric person who I think is awesome, by the way, like an awesome employee of this comic book store. I'm not saying any of this negative, but just the contrast between the two of us was very marked. And then when they were like, oh, I've heard good things about this comic, like, who is this character? And in my head, I was just like, God damn, I'm such an old stereotype. Well, but then I had a nice conversation about Night Thrasher with this person.
that also just comes with being old, because that happens to me at work all the time. So I recently had we have this 19-year-old security guard, real good kid, like he's hard friggin' worker, does his job, like very reliable, and we were just kind of shooting the shit the one night, and he was like, so how long you been doing this job for? And I was like, 24 years, and he just stopped and he went, dude. And I went, yeah, I know, I've been working here 5 years longer than you've been alive, So and he was just like, yeah, I wasn't gonna say it, but dude. And I'm like, yeah, okay, come on, you're making me feel old now. Like, stop.
Oh, yeah. I had a conversation with somebody at work recently, somebody in their early 20s who works for me. I was able to hire somebody to work for me, and we were just getting to know each other, and like, comics and movies and stuff came up, and we were, trying to, find a connection, like a common ground to talk about stuff. And, comics came up, and I didn't want to be like aggressive and just jump on that, like, oh, what kind of comics do you like? Let me tell you all about it. And then, just have diarrhea of the mouth all over this poor guy. But he told me some comics, and then was like, oh, I like this comic. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like Jonathan Hickman writing the X-Men. I haven't read that. Like, I've kind of given up on like, modern Marvel superhero comics, but I like Jonathan Hickman because he wrote this comic and this other comic. And this guy who works for me was like, oh, I hadn't heard of those. That's really cool. Do you have any other recommendations? And I had to like stop. And I'm like, oh, hang on a second. Like, let me
That's a loaded question.
I know. Like, let me bite my tongue here because like, oh, but also like, what kind of recommendations do I want to give? Because my initial reaction is, oh man, these are all my favorite comics. And like, very few of them are superhero, but most of them are at least 20 years old, or they're from creators who are probably in their 50s or older. And I'm like, no, let's not go there. Like, let me stop and think for a second. Like, what can this guy like relate to? But whatever. We've gotten like way off the topic. Anyway, so it does remind me of a recent experience to kind of tie back to what we were talking about earlier, where I had brought up Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and how so many people just hated that movie before it ever came out, just shat all over it because it looked really stupid. And then when it did come out, a lot of people hated it. A lot of people genuinely thought that it was stupid. I was a person who saw the movie and was like, I don't hate it, but I do think it's dumb. And was like, okay, whatever. Yeah. But so I kind of bought into this, the overall zeitgeist of the opinion that the fourth Indiana Jones movie just should not exist. Like, they should have just left the trilogy alone and just moved on. There was no reason to go back to it. They didn't do a good job. But then just a year or two ago, I sat down with Tegan, my 17-year-old, so mentioning the age for context, and we had watched the first three Indiana Jones, and Tegan liked them. And we have this thing where, we take turns watching movies. Like, they'll pick a more modern movie. I'll pick what to me is like a classic. And we've been doing it for years. So we've gone through a lot of like the old franchises, but we hadn't finished Indiana Jones. And even Tegan kept saying like, oh, that fourth one, who cares? And I'm like, it was kind of bothering me. Like, well, you've never seen it. I saw it. Maybe I shouldn't have like colored your opinion of it. So I was like, you know what? We're going to watch it. This is going to be my pick for the night. We're going to watch Crystal Skull. And in my head, I'm just like, oh God, this is probably going to suck. But Tegan ended up really, really enjoying it. And I enjoyed it way more the second time. I think maybe because my expectations weren't so high,
100%. And dude, that happens absolutely often to me with movies. The last one I can think of on the Boogeyman's Closet that happened with was the remake of The House on Haunted Hill. I remember seeing that in 1999 in the theater and thinking it was fun, but had a horrible ending. And I remember hating the ending. And that colored my opinion for years. I was like, oh, it's a shitty movie. It's a shitty movie. It doesn't end well. It's crappy. And then we watched it for the podcast. And I don't know if it was just I was far enough removed from it, but I was like, fuck, this is actually really good. Like, why did I hate it so much? And like all the stuff that I could remember hating, I'm looking at it in this going, I don't hate it even a little. Like, it's well done. What the fuck was wrong with me? So sometimes I think you just need to be removed from a situation, or maybe it didn't land well the first time you watch, or you were in the wrong headspace or whatever it was. Like that's happened to me tons of times with like books, with music, with movies, where I don't like it for whatever reason, and then I watch it or give it another chance like years later and I end up really liking it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm trying to be open to that sort of thing. And after we watched Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and Tegan came away really enjoying it, like not only enjoying it, but saying like, why do people say that movie was so bad? That movie was great. Like, what was wrong with it? And, like, just incredulous, like genuinely could not understand why people hated it so much. I mean, yeah, all the Indiana Jones movies are kind of dumb. They all have stuff in them that's stupid. And Tegan's number one argument was, well, people say that it's dumb because it has like aliens and all this other weird stuff, and it wasn't like the first three. And she's like, the movies have always been supernatural. There was like, biblical stuff and like, weird rituals where they ripped a guy's heart out. Like, it's always been over the top and silly. So like, what was the big deal?
Right. Like, there's always been ghosts and magic.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, I really like that argument. And so the next time it was my turn to pick a movie, we ended up watching The Dial of Destiny, which had been out at that point. And it hadn't been out for very long, but you probably remember how much that movie was shat on after it came out. And my recollection of it was that people were looking forward to it, so it wasn't like they were hating it before it came out, but as soon as it came out, it was just hate all over the internet. Like, oh my God, they let us down. Spielberg fucking ruined it. Another Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, like, stinker. Like, he should just give it up. And so I never watched it. I wanted to, but I just was like, oh, whatever, we'll get to it someday. So after rewatching Crystal Skull, I'm like, all right, the very next movie we watch when it's my turn to pick, we're going to do Dial of Destiny. And we both fucking loved it. Like, not even like, yeah, it was okay, but it was dumb. But like, no, like, this was a fucking great Indiana Jones movie. Like, so fun.
I still haven't seen it. So now I'm a little more excited to watch it. Like, I heard, our friend Hibbard, he told me that it was an enjoyable Indiana Jones movies. Like, just watch it. I think you'll dig it. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So it's not like I've been avoiding it. It's just, I got other things to do. But yeah, now hearing, you say that as well, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to watch it sooner rather than later. Because again, I didn't hate Crystal Skull. I was of the mindset, like, when I saw it in the theater, I was like, okay, like, I didn't like all the CGI. Like, my problem wasn't the aliens. My problem was the CGI monkeys, the CGI ants, Shia LaBeouf. Like, I didn't really care about his character. So there were other problems for me. The alien part, like, I thought they explained it away perfectly when he makes the comment. I'm paraphrasing here, but it talks about, like, they were talking about, like, the gods or something. It depends on who your god is, something like that. Like, so they were basically saying that, like, spirituality, like the whole heaven and hell, like, spirits exist in this world. We've already seen it with, Raiders of the Lost Ark and shit like that. And fucking Last Crusade. We already saw that, like, Christian mythology, whatever you want to say, is in that universe.
Yeah.
So, okay, aliens exist too. Not a problem. We also see that people can't die the way they would normally die. Like, it's a serial. It's like those fucking old school adventure serials, like, where people could fall off a mountain and survive. Like, and they've always done that. So It's like, I didn't even care about the nuked fridge moment, like people bitched about, because I'm like, what about the rubber raft in Temple of Doom? Like, it's the same shit.
Yeah.
So
it's funny. Tegan had the same argument when that fridge scene came up, and later on we were talking about it, and I was like, yeah, like, people complained about the fridge nuke, and then Tegan mentioned the same thing. Like, what about the freaking raft out of the plane?
Right.
Like, how do you survive that?
Even as a kid, I thought that was silly. Like,
the movies are silly. They're silly and they're supernatural, and they're just goofy adventure movies that people take way too fucking seriously, and, like, just have some fun with it. I mean, yeah, the CGI is bad, but the CGI is bad in a lot of movies, including fucking Star Wars movies that people love. But, like, whatever, man. And Hellboy. I watched the first Hellboy movie with Ron Perlman again about a week ago, and I'm sorry, but the CGI is not good, but that is still a great movie.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Like, we were actually discussing this off the air, the fact that CGI nowadays is nowhere near as good as it was like 10, 15 years ago. And I think that's because, like, now everything, it's so rushed. Whereas, and in fact, I shouldn't say I know it's because everything is so rushed. I've seen so many different digital artists and VFX artists complain about this, where studios, the turnaround is so much faster than it used to be. Because, again, there's not that whole, we're going to have a theatrical release, then a year later we're going to have a home video release, and then a year later we're going to have a cable release, where each one was a big event. Now it's like, all right, we're releasing in theaters and streaming, or we're releasing theaters only and then 2 weeks later on streaming. Like, this, it's a new era. So we're consuming content so much faster, and they're trying to make content for everyone. So they're that constant fast turnaround rate. So these fucking VFX artists are working themselves to the bone trying to get these huge shot lists done in like a week. Like, I remember the one that pissed me off is they were breaking it down how, like, a studio will say, we got to do 60 effect shots this week. So we got 7 days to do 60 of them. One of them will be something like remove wires. So, okay, cool. Just remove wires from the scene. Then the next effect shot will be, you have an alien armada invading Earth. Like, wait, no, you got to do a whole bunch of ships and aliens and like, what the fuck? Like, that should not count as one shot. So suddenly the shot list becomes insanely difficult to complete in the time they have. So that's why when you watch something like The Flash, the fucking CGI of, like, Superwoman or Supergirl looks awful in comparison to fucking Man of Steel, which came out in 2014. It's like, yeah, the CGI back then was a lot better because they had the time to work on it. They were allowed to finish what they started.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I think that people are more forgiving of it now too. I think that there's a whole generation who have grown up with CGI as being not only normal, but the expected way that special effects are done in a movie. And so I think what you end up with is that the movie going public in general doesn't really care about bad CGI in the same way that people used to bitch about it all over social media, 10 years ago. You would see all kinds of like top 10 lists and top 10 videos of pointing out, shit that sucks. And now there's stuff that sucks worse than like the Scorpion King that's coming out all the time. And no one says anything about it. No one says boo, because we're just used to it now, because we know what CGI can do. And then sometimes it's high budget and sometimes it's not, in the same way that practical effects used to be, the norm. And sometimes you'd have a movie where you can see the zipper up the back of the monster, and sometimes you'd have something amazing, but people went with it because it's like, well, what kind of movie am I watching? And people don't really care anymore.
That is 100% true, because sometimes you got Jurassic Park and sometimes you got Tammy and the T-Rex.
Exactly.
So that's very fair. I never considered that.
Yeah. Well, and the second outcome that I mentioned is that now you have people who really like to see practical effects again. And so movie studios are spending money on practical effects now, because people are realizing that you can't do everything with CGI, and sometimes it looks bad. And so I think that now there's this combination of both nostalgia and a realization that sometimes you can get better effects for cheaper if you pay someone to make a mask than if you pay someone, to paint it on a computer screen. So I think that the pendulum has swung back in the other direction on practical effects, and we're seeing a much healthier mix of both.
Yeah. No, that's I'm actually glad you said that, because that kind of opened my eyes to a bit of a bias I was having lately. So, but at the same time, I still do think that these companies need to give their artists and their writers and their actors time to do the craft that they set out to do. Like, because I always think of stuff like John Carpenter's The Thing, where they had like, what was it? I think a year lead in to do the effects, to do the set design, to work out the script, like a fucking year. And then you got that 2012 Thing prequel that could have been so good. And when you see like the production, like you see what they were working with, man, the practical effects they were trying to create were gorgeous, but they had to cover a lot of it up with CGI because they only had like 3 months. So they didn't have the time to complete what they were setting out to do. And it's a shame, because when you see the artistry that they were working with, it was fucking gorgeous. And then to see the final product, it's like, oh man, why did you guys rush? Like, let them work it out. Come on.
Yeah. Sometimes, like I said, you got to just, roll with it. You understand that what you're watching, the MCU is a really good example of movies that have these gigantic budgets and these long lead-in times. And so you watch the big Avengers movies or, whatever, and the special effects are amazing and you expect them to be. And if they weren't, it would kind of stand out. But then you watch like the TV shows and you see She-Hulk and it doesn't look good, but like, okay, yeah, but it's also like an 8-episode like TV show. There's a bunch of other TV shows. They're not going to dump their whole budget into this. Like, go back 20 or 30 years, and if we were watching a Jurassic Park TV show or the RoboCop TV show, you're not going to expect the same kind of effects on TV that you get in the movie, because they're trying to pump these TV shows out every week or every month or whatever. Yeah. So you just expect that the TV show is not going to look as good, and complaining about it is pointless. Like, of course it's not going to look as good. You're not going to get 13 episodes on the same budget. If you want them to look as good as the movie, they need to make another movie. But if you want to watch a TV show, then you need to, appreciate the reality that they got to dial the budget down a little bit.
Exactly. And that is 100% true. Because like if you mentioned RoboCop in specific, like, and that is the one thing that I kind of snorted about when I was watching the Prime directives, was just like how Murphy looked without his mask on. Like, whereas in the movie, like, you see all the, like, the flesh is, like, attached to the circuitry, and it's like, it almost looks like they stretched his skin over, like, a robotic facade. It's like, it's creepy. And in this one, it kind of looks like a dude wearing a helmet, and it's like, all right, it is what it is. And you just kind of roll with it. And you just
Yeah, I mean, we're like totally way off topic, but yeah, I think that might be one of the reasons why I never really got into watching like sci-fi TV shows that much. And this is me just looking backwards thinking, I wonder if that had anything to do with it. Because I just never really got into watching like Stargate or, Star Trek The Next Generation or any of those old sci-fi shows, or even like early superhero shows on TV like Witchblade. Like even X-Files, I never really got into it that much. And I remember just thinking that those shows looked bad. And I don't know in retrospect if I didn't watch them because I thought they looked bad, or, if I was just like, yeah, whatever, I don't really care. I mean, I don't really know. But yeah, looking back on it, it's like, yeah, I never really watched any of those shows. So I guess I never really appreciated the special effects that much. But anyway, we got way off topic of our rental rant about preemptive strikes, about bullshit, toxic ass fans who like to bitch about stuff and pan things before they even come out. We went all over the place talking about a bunch of different random stuff, but you know what? I'm okay. This is a rant. It doesn't necessarily have to, follow a script.
That's true. And we kind of did. We did touch on specific movies and shows and games that suffered from that preemptive strike. Like you said, Crystal Skull, MK1, etc. But yeah, it is just a shitty thing, though, to not experience something for yourself and to perpetuate that it's bad without having ever checked it out. It's like what it reminds me of, and I feel like any parent in existence will know this feeling. When you have a toddler and you make a good plate of food for them and they look at it and go, I don't like it. And you're like, you've never had it. I don't like it. It's like, okay, At least try it first. Like you always do that. Just try it. If you don't like it, that's okay. Then you can say no, thank you, and you move on. But just try it first. You might like it. And it's like, how many times I had to do that with Caleb because he was a very picky eater at one point, and I would have to be like, just try it, and then he would try it, and he'd go, oh, this is really good, and I'm like, there you go, like just try it first.
I know, right? Or what we hope they don't do is decide, no, I don't like asparagus, and then they go tell every kid in the neighborhood, asparagus sucks, right? We all fucking hate asparagus. Go tell your moms asparagus sucks. It's like, you don't know. But like, that sounds goofy, but that's what people do when they go out there and, they're like, oh, you don't want to go watch, that new Star Wars TV show. That show sucks. It's like, well, you didn't even fucking watch it yet. You have no idea. Right. Like, but you're over here telling everybody that it sucks. But then the people who hear you are just catching that disease, and they're perpetuating it and going around telling everyone else that it sucks. And then you go on social media and you teach a new generation like my kids who grow up thinking like, oh, well, that thing sucks. And it's like, you don't know. You have no clue.
You have not experienced it. Stop it.
Exactly. It's like, if you don't want to experience it, then don't experience it. But don't tell people that it sucks.
Exactly. And sometimes there are whole YouTube channels that are like devoted to being like, okay, we have to get enough people together to like boycott this, to try to change it because they're that adamant about their hatred of whatever it is. And it's like, and I know we did mention this. I think, I don't know if we mentioned it during the recording, but I know we talked about it off the air, the Sonic thing. Like, yeah, in that particular case, like there was some good that came out of it in twofold. Like, one, the Sonic that we got ended up looking a lot more like the games and cartoons and comics, and they were both really fun movies. But we also got Ugly Sonic that they got to use in Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers, which was fucking rad. So and there's one example of people getting pissed about something that actually turned out really well.
Yeah.
But well, 9 times out of 10 it kills the property.
Absolutely. But, there's exceptions to every rule, even the one that we're bitching about right here. And, how we ourselves have both admitted during this episode that we have perpetuated, this sort of like sight unseen or spite unseen hatred ourselves. And so, whatever, we're just here to bitch about bullshit that we see in the fandom that, that we belong to. We consume a lot of pop culture material, from movies to books to comics to toys, you name it. And man, when you are in a pop culture fandom and you belong to that type of a community, whether it's in person or online, it's important to like not feed the haters, and just and always be positive about the things that you like, because if you like it, then you should like it and not hate it. I mean, there's no point in hating something that you're supposed to like. If you don't like it, if you hate it, if you think it's stupid, then go away and leave people alone. But if you like it, then like it, be positive about it, let other people like it. We've had many episodes here where we've talked about, not gatekeeping and, not being that jerk that wants to keep somebody out. So yeah, sometimes that needs to happen before the movie or the book or comic or whatever even is released, you got to start on a good foot, start positive, hope for the best, because you never know.
Yeah. And I mean, and this is something that I personally have taken a lot of shit for on the Boogeyman's Closet, but something that I try repeatedly to do with any media I consume is, even if I dislike it, I try to find something, like, I try to find something good about it, like something positive that I can say. But usually I try to look at it from the point of view of the people making it. Like what were they aiming at? Like, I might not be understanding it. So sometimes just try to look at something from a different perspective before you decide whether you hate it or not. Or like we had said, before, we might not have liked it the first time around, but separate yourself a little while and check it out again. You might find out that you actually really do like it, especially if you feel biased before going in.
Yeah, exactly. And at the risk of going on and repeating ourselves, like, it makes me sad. It genuinely makes me sad when people like poison another person against something that they might have enjoyed. The final example that I'll give is with my son Griffin, who's 12. Lately, we've been getting into watching the Friday the 13th movie series, and we talked a long time about like where we were going to start. Like, do you start at the beginning, or do you start with one of the later movies where like Jason is kind of already Jason? Like, what do you want? Like, how do you want to handle that? And so I let Griffin decide, and we decided to jump in to the later ones where Jason is already Jason, and then we'll treat the beginning of the series like a prequel and go back and watch it later. And the next one that Griffin needs to watch is part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. And when we were done watching, part 7, which a lot of people really enjoy, we were kind of talking about like what's coming up next. And I wanted to kick Tegan, because Tegan goes like, oh, well, part 8 is next. And like, oh, a lot of people don't like that one. And I'm like, be quiet. Don't say that. Like, even though Tegan didn't say, I don't like that one, it was more of like, oh, a lot of people don't like it. It's like, no, don't color his opinion. Like, let's just watch it. Like, let him go into it, completely as a blank slate as much as possible, and have his own opinion, rather than deciding like, well, this next one's gonna suck, but I guess we'll get through it. And it's like, no, like, you're gonna ruin it before we even get to start.
And I think that's a lot more prevalent nowadays. Again, I shouldn't say I think this. I know it's more prevalent nowadays because of social media, where it's like when we were children, like, we either had to catch something, it was just word of mouth, or like random magazines. So like a lot of times you got movies like the rubber-eared Captain America,
Right.
And it still did kind of okay for a bit, it's like, because there wasn't this preemptive strike, there wasn't this crushing something ahead of time. I mean, granted, you got a lot of movies like the Roger Corman Fantastic Four, where it was just made to hold the license, but that never was meant to come out. But it's still, I think nowadays more than ever, it's hard to not have your opinion colored about something before you even experience it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It is really, really difficult in the age of social media, because you can't even avoid trailers anymore. You can't avoid headlines anymore. You can't avoid spoilers anymore, no matter how much you try. If you want to engage in social media, and even if your social media is limited to things like YouTube, it doesn't matter. You are going to have things ruined for you, spoiled for you. It just yesterday I had a comic book spoiled for me on Facebook, because some dipshit just threw it out there in a status update rather than like putting it in the comments or behind like a spoiler alert. And I was like, you dickhead, like, I'm just trying to look and see like what my mom's doing.
Yep.
But anyway,
I had the same thing happen to me with The Acolyte. I'm not fully caught up, and someone posted like a spoiler to how the latest episode, like something that happens in the latest episode, and I'm like, well, thanks, guys. I was just scrolling through TikTok, and it's just like, blah, right there. Like, fuck you. So
yeah, exactly. So we'll leave it at that. And we'll give a little preview of what our next rental rant will be whenever we decide to release it. But we were talking before we started recording this one, talking off air, and we were going down this completely separate rabbit trail about criticizing a piece of art, or being allowed to criticize a piece of art without necessarily criticizing the creator of that art.
Yes.
And being able to separate the fact that a movie or a comic or a book or something can be approached on its own merits, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have anything against the people who are making it, or that you support the people who are making it, because it's kind of a two-sided coin. So I'm just going to throw that one out there just to kind of plant the seed for next time. And also it's a reminder to me when I listen to this later that we got to put that on the schedule. So with that, this one's running a little bit long, and we'll go ahead and wrap this up. And I will say, visit us on the socials, visit us at raisedbyrentals.com. If you like this episode, check out Rad Pantheon, our super team of podcasters, artists, musicians, all sorts of rad people banding together to support rad stuff. And you can check that out at radpantheon.com and at Rad Pantheon on all the socials. We'll try to keep it spoiler free. What do you got going on, Mike?
Not a whole heck of a lot. Still working on Count Creepy Head Saturday Morning Monster Mash. Still doing those episodes. We should have a new episode of Member Berries and Munchies shortly. I just got to finish editing it. And hopefully next month, Boogeyman's Closet will be making its triumphant return.
Heck yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, and tomorrow I will be recording on someone else's podcast, so I'm looking forward to that. I'll let that person announce when that's going to happen, but that should be fun. And with that, I will just say thanks once again for tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. If you had fun with us, drop us a line, leave a comment, leave a podcast rating. Let us know what we should bitch about next time. And with that, I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we have to return some videotapes. Raised by Rentals is a member of the Rad Pantheon Network. Visit radpantheon.com to support rad stuff. The theme music is Forbidden Fruit by Velvet Bethany. You can purchase music and learn more at velvetbethany.com.
You should try it. You might like it. Try it. You like it. Try it.